We're going to jump right in today, straight into one of the darkest and most self-destructive moments for the Western Roman Empire.
We're not talking about Caesar or Augustus here.
Not
He did at the Catalonian plains. I mean, he essentially saved what was left of Gaul and Italy from being completely overrun. For decades, he was the guy. The military shield, the real administrator.
But even a man that indispensable can make a fatal error, can't he?
Oh, absolutely. And Aetius's mistake was a political one. He tried to lock in his family's power for the future.
Okay, so let's unpack that. He's got all this power, but it's not official. It's not hereditary.
Exactly. He needs legitimacy. So he tries to arrange an engagement between his son and Emperor Valentinian's own daughter.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just, a simple wedding announcement. This was a clear signal.
It was a direct path to the throne. He was publicly positioning his family to take over the whole imperial line.
And for a deeply insecure emperor, that was a step too far.
A massive step too far. Look, Valentinian had been emperor since he was 6 years old, 30 years on the throne, and every single one of them spent in the shadow of his general.
And what a reign it was.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale of the losses under his watch is just staggering.
It really is. Under Valentinian, the empire lost Hispania.
Yeah.
Gone. Huge parts of Gaul are now basically independent kingdoms.
And the biggest blow of all.
North Africa, the breadbasket of Italy, lost to Gaiseric and the Vandals. Imagine the psychological pressure on this guy. He knows his name is going to be forever linked with this colossal failure.
So he's resentful, he's insecure, he's just desperate for one moment to prove that he's actually in charge.
And that makes him the perfect target for a schemer.
And there was someone waiting in the wings, wasn't there?
Oh, yes. Petronius Maximus. A hugely powerful senator, a former prefect of Rome, which, basically made him the governor of Italy. He had his own ambitions for the imperial purple.
So he sees his opening.
He does. The historian John of Antioch tells us that Maximus went directly to the emperor and just poisoned his mind. He played on all of Valentinian's deepest fears.
How did he frame it? What was the line?
He told him that Aetius was planning to seize the throne by force. He apparently said, and this is a direct quote, unless he quickly slew Aetius, he would be slain by him.
Wow.
It's brilliant in a terrifying way. He convinced the emperor that the one man keeping the state alive was secretly his greatest enemy. Valentinian bought it completely. He had to strike first.
And the scene of the assassination itself is just, it's so shocking because it's so public.
It's not some back alley plot. This happens in the imperial court in Ravenna in 455. Aetius is just there for a meeting.
A totally routine visit.
Completely routine. He's not surrounded by guards or anything. He's there to present issues with, of all things, tax collection, just the boring bureaucratic work of keeping the lights on.
And Valentinian just snaps.
He leaps up from his throne, screaming about treachery. Before anyone can react, he draws his own sword.
And he kills him personally.
With his own hand. Strikes him down. Aetius, the man who faced down Attila the Hun on the battlefield, dies right there on the throne room floor, in front of a court that is just stunned into silence.
The audacity of it is breathtaking.
It is, and the irony is captured perfectly in what happens next. Valentinian, probably feeling powerful for the first time in his life, turns to one of his officers and asks, was not the death of Aetius well accomplished?
He's looking for a pat on the back.
He wants validation, and what he gets is one of the most devastating lines in Roman history. The officer looks at him and says, whether well or not, I do not know, but I do know that you have cut off your right hand with your left.
You've just destroyed the only thing holding this empire together.
Precisely. Valentinian had finally achieved total independent power for a few weeks. By killing Aetius, he had just guaranteed the final collapse. He'd won the throne only to shatter it.
So when you cut off your right hand, you find out very quickly just how defenseless you are. That officer's prediction, it came true almost immediately.
Instantly. Valentinian had created this enormous power vacuum, and of course, Petronius Maximus, the man who whispered in his ear, was ready to fill it.
The payback came fast.
Just weeks later. Maximus was smart. He didn't try to kill the emperor himself. No, he used Aetius's old army buddies, men who were, understandably furious.
Of course, their commander had been betrayed and murdered.
So they track Valentinian down while he's practicing archery in a public space, the Campus Martius, and they assassinate him. And just like that, Maximus takes the crown and declares himself emperor.
So that's 2 emperors murdered in 2 months. The cycle of violence is just spinning out of control.
And the new emperor, Maximus, inherits the #1 threat. Gaiseric and the Vandals, sitting right across the Mediterranean in North Africa, just watching all this chaos unfold.
He must have known they were coming.
He knew. He scrambled to find allies, sending a retired prefect named Avitus all the way to Toulouse to try and negotiate a deal with the Visigoth king. You can feel the desperation.
But it's too little too late. Gaiseric sees his chance.
With Aetius gone, there's no one left to stop him. The Vandals land their ships in southern Italy.
And in Rome.
Utter panic. Riots break out everywhere. The people knew the government was a sham. The army was leaderless. The city was a tinderbox.
Maximus tries to get out of the city, right? He tries to flee.
He does. But as he's riding away, trying to escape the mob, a rioter throws a rock. It strikes him, kills him. He ruled for just 77 days.
So Rome is left with no emperor, no general, and a Vandal army marching towards its gates.
And 3 days later, April 22nd, 455, Gaiseric and his army break through. What follows is the sack of Rome that gives the Vandals their name forever.
This is where we get the word vandalize. But we need to be a bit careful with that.
No. The research is pretty clear on this. When we say vandalize, we mean mindless destruction. Gaiseric's plan was anything but mindless.
He was targeted.
Highly strategic. He wasn't there to burn the city down. He was there to liquidate its assets. It was a massive, organized, smash-and-grab job.
A very professional operation.
Incredibly professional. They were stripping the city of every last ounce of gold and silver. To give you an idea of the scale, they even tore the gold plating off the roof of the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus.
That's not just theft, that's symbolic.
It's a statement. They were dismantling the very symbols of Roman power.
But one man did manage to save the city from being completely incinerated.
Pope Leo the Great. Just as he had met with Attila the Hun, he went out to meet Gaiseric at the gates.
And he had some success, but it was limited.
It was. He convinced Gaiseric not to burn the city or carry out a general massacre, which was a huge victory. But he couldn't stop the plunder, and he couldn't stop the greatest humiliation of all.
Gaiseric took the imperial family.
He seized Valentinian's widow, Eudoxia, and her 2 daughters. He took them in ships overflowing with treasure all the way back to his capital in Carthage.
And that kidnapping had long-term consequences.
Devastating ones. One of the daughters, Eudoxia, the same girl Aetius had wanted for his son, was married off to Gaiseric's son. This created a direct link between the Roman imperial house and its most feared enemy. A terrifying sign of the new reality.
So, what about Avitus, the guy sent to get help from the Visigoths?
He's still Toulouse when he hears about all of this. And the Visigoth king, Theoderic, sees an opportunity. He convinces Avitus to declare himself emperor with the backing of the Visigoth army.
So he marches into Rome, the 4th emperor in just over a year.
And he walks into a complete disaster zone. The city isn't just wrecked, it's starving. The famine is so bad he has to send his Visigoth allies away almost immediately because Rome literally cannot feed them.
But he still owes them, right? He has to pay them somehow.
He does, and with the treasury empty, he does something that makes the Roman people absolutely furious.
What's that?
He orders the remaining bronze stripped from public buildings to melt down for coin. To the people, it felt like he was robbing the city's heritage to pay off his barbarian friends. His popularity just cratered.
And that kind of power vacuum is where new players emerge.
Exactly. And this is the moment Ricimer steps onto the stage. He's a half-German general, and while Avitus is fumbling in Rome, Ricimer is out on the coast, actually winning battles against Vandal raiding parties.
So he's looking competent, while the emperor looks like a failure.
Precisely. He builds up massive support. So in 456, when Avitus finally flees the city, Ricimer's forces capture him. And soon after, Avitus dies of unknown causes.
Which we all know what that means.
A political elimination. Ricimer had arrived. He was now the ultimate kingmaker.
And this begins a whole new phase for the Western Empire, doesn't it? The era of the puppet master. Ricimer is in charge, but he never actually takes the title of emperor himself.
He understood the politics perfectly. Ricimer's background, his father was Sué, his mother Visigothic, meant he was a barbarian. The Roman Senate, the people, the Eastern Emperor, they would never accept him on the throne.
So instead of fighting for the crown, he decided to control the man wearing it.
Exactly. He appoints a man named Majorian to be his public face.
And Majorian wasn't just some nobody. He was an experienced soldier. He'd served with Ricimer under Aetius. He had ambitions of his own.
He did. And he launched what you could call the last great military effort of the Western Empire, a full-scale invasion to retake North Africa from the Vandals.
A huge undertaking.
Colossal. He put together a fleet of 300 ships on the coast of Hispania. I mean, the hopes of the entire Roman world were riding on this invasion. If he could win back the grain supply, maybe the West had a chance.
But the whole thing collapsed before a single ship set sail.
That's right. The chronicler Aetius tells us the entire fleet was seized or destroyed by Vandals who had been, and this is the key phrase, given information by traitors.
So sabotage.
Sabotage. Whether it was Visigoths who wanted him to fail or Romans who opposed him, we don't know. But the result was total humiliation. The fleet was gone.
And a humiliated emperor is a liability for Ricimer.
A useless puppet. Majorian had to march back to Italy in disgrace, and Ricimer's men were waiting for him. They intercepted him in the Apennine foothills and beheaded him in 461.
The cycle just continues, so Ricimer appoints another puppet, Livius Severus,
who rules quietly for a few years and then dies in 465. Sickness, probably poison. And this is where it gets really interesting and really symbolic.
What does Ricimer do?
Nothing. For 18 months, there is no emperor in the West. He just lets the throne sit empty.
What's the message there?
The message is that the title of emperor is now a complete fiction. The lack of a ruler proved the reality on the ground. The Western Empire was little more than Italy, and it showed that the line between Roman and barbarian had blurred to the point of being meaningless. The barbarian general was the only source of stability.
But he eventually needs an emperor again. That fiction is useful for waging war.
It is. The Visigoth king, Euric, starts getting aggressive in Gaul. So Ricimer needs an official head of state. He kicks a man named Anthemius, a Roman general with strong ties to the Eastern court.
And to seal the deal, there's another political marriage.
A classic Roman move. Anthemius forces Ricimer to marry his daughter Olympia.
And we actually have a sense of how that went over.
We do, thanks to the poet Sidonius Apollinaris. He writes about the wedding, but all the sources imply that the bride, Olympia, was miserable. Ricimer was a rough soldier in his 60s, 15 years older than her own father. This was an emperor sacrificing his daughter for an army.
So with this shaky alliance in place, they plan to take on the Visigoths, and they find a rather unexpected ally.
A tragic one, a Briton named Rodimus. He'd crossed the English Channel with 12,000 of his men, trying to escape the fighting with the Angles and Saxons in Britain.
He brings a huge force to the table.
A disciplined army of 12,000 men, but the coordination between the allies was a disaster. The Visigoth king Euric launched a preemptive strike.
And he hits Rodimus's army first.
He does, with an innumerable army. The Britons were completely routed before they could even link up with the main Roman force. The whole campaign just collapsed before it began.
Another massive failure. And things start to go downhill very fast for Anthemius after this.
Very fast. He falls seriously ill around 470. And in a classic move of a paranoid ruler, he becomes convinced it's black magic. He starts executing people for sorcery.
So he's lost his mind, and Ricimer has had enough of his father-in-law.
Completely exasperated. In 472, Ricimer marches his army on Rome, defeats Anthemius' forces, and has him executed.
The kingmaker kills his last major puppet.
He does. But Ricimer's own end was near. Just 2 months later, he catches a fever and dies. The man who had controlled the West for 16 years was gone, leaving nothing but chaos in his wake.
With Ricimer out of the picture, the Western Empire enters its final chaotic death throes. 4 emperors in 4 years. None of them can hold on to power.
It's just a revolving door of failure. And this instability opens the door for the next barbarian general to take control, this time a man named Orestes.
He has a really interesting backstory, doesn't he?
Fascinating. He was a Romanized barbarian who had actually served as Attila the Hun's ambassador. After the Hunnic Empire fell apart, he came back to the Roman army and became incredibly popular with the Germanic mercenary troops.
Who were, by this point, the only real army left.
They were. So in 475, Orestes leads his mercenaries to Ravenna. The emperor at the time, Julius Nepos, just flees, doesn't even put up a fight.
But Orestes, like Ricimer, doesn't take the throne himself.
Right. He understands the political reality, so he decides to keep the fiction of Roman rule alive by making his own son the emperor.
His 10-year-old son.
A 10-year-old boy named Romulus, a very symbolic name, of course. His mother was Roman, which gave him a thin veneer of legitimacy.
But the title of emperor had become so meaningless that the people immediately gave him a nickname.
They did. Augustulus.
Little Augustus.
Little Augustus. That patronizing name tells you everything. It's an echo, a tiny, insignificant ghost of the great founder of the empire. The whole charade lasted less than a year.
And in 476 AD, the year we all learn in school, the fiction finally collapses over a very simple problem: land.
It always comes down to payment. Orestes had promised his Germanic mercenaries land in Italy for their service. Their leader, a Christian German named Odovacer, comes to collect.
And Orestes refuses.
He refuses. He argues that giving away Italian land to barbarians is a political line he just can't cross, even though he owes his entire position to them.
A fatal miscalculation.
Completely. Odovacer rallies the mercenaries. They see Orestes as a leader who won't pay his bills. They march on Ravenna. Orestes is defeated and killed at Placentia.
So Odovacer captures the capital, and the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus.
He does, but he's a pragmatist. He knows there's no glory in executing a 10-year-old boy, so he does something surprisingly gentle.
He sends him into retirement.
Pensions him off, sends him to live a quiet life in a fortress near Naples, and that's it. That's the end. The historian Jordanes wrote that the Western Empire perished, and from this time onward, kings of the Goths held Rome and Italy.
So it doesn't end in a great fiery battle. It ends with a mercenary commander politely firing the child emperor.
It was the final admission that the old system was dead. Odovacer takes the title King of Italy. He doesn't need a Roman puppet anymore. He's a competent general, a Christian leader. For him and his men, that was all that mattered. The project of becoming Roman was officially over.
Now, while all this is happening, while the West is literally dissolving, the Eastern Empire in Constantinople is facing its own problems. It survives, but it's a close-run thing.
It is. Their crises are just as severe, but their political structures are just a little more robust. In 457, their emperor Marcian dies, and that's the end of the long-running Theodosian dynasty.
A power vacuum.
A huge one. And just like in the West, the top general, a man named Aspar, is the real power player.
But he runs into the same problem as Resimer, right? The barbarian blood issue.
Exactly. Aspar was of Alan descent, and the elite in Constantinople were fiercely, almost snobbishly, Roman and Orthodox Christian. They would never accept him on the throne.
So he pulls a Resimer, he appoints a puppet.
He does. He picks his household steward, a man named Leo, to be the new emperor.
And this coronation is a big deal, historically.
It's crucial. For the first time, the Patriarch of Constantinople, the city's top bishop, is the one who crowns the emperor. This elevates the church's role in politics in a way that will define the Byzantine Empire for the next 1,000 years.
But the puppet, Leo, doesn't stay a puppet for long.
Of course not. He immediately starts looking for his own power base to counterbalance Aspar, and he finds it with the Isaurians.
Who were the Isaurians?
They're a really interesting group, a warlike people from the mountains of Asia Minor. They're tough, they're independent, but crucially, after 500 years of Roman rule, they are considered Roman citizens.
So they have military skill, but none of the political baggage of being a Goth or an Alan.
Precisely. So Leo makes an alliance. He marries his own daughter, Ariadne, to the top Isaurian leader, Zeno.
And that gives him the muscle he needs to deal with Aspar.
It does. In 471, Leo has Aspar executed. The puppet kills his master. A few years later, Leo dies, and his grandson becomes emperor, but he's only a child and dies quickly. So his father, the Isaurian general Zeno, becomes the emperor of the East.
But the Roman aristocracy in Constantinople can't have been happy about an Isaurian on the throne.
Not at all. And that leads to a brief but brutal episode where Zeno is driven out by his brother-in-law, Basiliscus. But Basiliscus proves to be a terrible ruler. His heavy taxes make him incredibly unpopular.
So Zeno makes a comeback.
He does. The people welcome him back. Basiliscus hides in a church, and Zeno makes a promise to spare his life.
A promise with a loophole.
A terrifyingly specific one. Zeno promises he will not shed Basiliscus's blood, and he keeps that promise. Instead, he seals Basiliscus and his family inside a dry cistern and lets them starve to death. No bloodshed.
That's chilling. It shows the kind of ruthless pragmatism needed to survive in that court.
It does. So now Zeno is firmly back in power, just as Odovacer is taking over Italy. And Odovacer needs legitimacy. He needs Constantinople to recognize him.
So he makes Zeno an offer.
A very clever one. He says, I will recognize you as the sole Roman emperor, the supreme overlord, if you recognize me as the legitimate ruler of Italy under your authority.
Zeno agrees to this.
He does. He gives Odovacer the title of patrician. On paper, this reunites the Roman world. In reality, it's a complete fiction. Odovacer immediately starts acting like an independent king, even conquering Sicily from the Vandals without asking permission.
So Zeno has a problem in Italy, but he has an even bigger one closer to home.
The Ostrogoths, led by Theoderic. Theoderic had actually spent 10 years as a hostage in Constantinople, so he knew the court inside and out. And now he's leading a massive, hungry, and desperate nation of Ostrogoths, and they're getting closer and closer to the capital.
Zeno tries to buy him off with titles and land.
He tries everything, but nothing works. The Ostrogoths are too numerous, they need a homeland.
This leads Zeno to a brilliant, if cynical, solution.
The ultimate two birds with one stone plan. He has two major barbarian problems. Odovacer in Italy is too independent, and Theoderic the Ostrogoth is too close.
So he points them at each other.
Exactly. In 488, he makes Theoderic an offer. I will recognize you as the king of Italy. I will give you the entire peninsula, provided you march your people west and get rid of Odovacer for me.
And Theoderic jumps at the chance.
Of course he does. It's the perfect solution for him, too. Zeno essentially subcontracts the reconquest of Italy to a new barbarian king, solving his eastern problem by kicking it over to the west.
And that sets up this massive clash between two barbarian kings for control of Italy.
It does. Theoderic's force is just enormous. It's not just an army, it's a migrating nation. Maybe 100,000 people, Ostrogoths, Huns, other tribes, all moving into Italy.
Odovacer can't stand against that kind of force.
He tries. He meets Theoderic at Verona, but his army is crushed. He's forced to retreat to Ravenna, where he holds up for a 3-year siege.
3 years is a long time. Why couldn't Theoderic break through?
Ravenna is surrounded by marshes, it's very difficult to assault, and Odovacer could be resupplied by sea, so the stalemate just drags on and on.
Until they finally reach a compromise.
They do. In 491, they sign a treaty to be co-rulers of Italy.
And how long does that last?
About 2 years. In 493, at a feast that was supposed to be celebrating their partnership, Theoderic betrays Odovacer and kills him with his own hands.
I think one account says he stabbed him and then made a joke about it.
That's the one. He supposedly said he'd confirmed his suspicion that Odovacer had no backbone. Just a brutal, contemptuous end. And with that, Theoderic the Great becomes the undisputed king of Italy.
And unlike Odovacer, Theoderic has zero interest in being a puppet for Constantinople.
None at all. His focus is on building a kingdom for his own people in Italy. He makes Ravenna his capital. He only visits the city of Rome once in the year 500 for a big ceremony, but he never goes back. The center of power has decisively shifted north.
And one of his first acts completely redefines what it means to be a citizen.
He does. He declares that Roman citizenship is no longer a birthright. It's now a gift from him, the Gothic king, granted only to those Romans who supported him.
So you have this really complex society taking shape. Goths and Romans living side by side.
It's deeply intertwined, but also strictly segregated. Goths start speaking Latin, they take Roman names, they marry Roman women, and Romans continue to run the entire civil administration, the bureaucracy.
But the real power.
The real power, the army, the high military post, that remains exclusively Gothic. The Goths hold the sword, the Romans hold the pen.
And that tension between the warrior and the administrator, it just explodes after Theoderic dies.
It does. Theoderic dies in 526, leaving his 10-year-old grandson, Athalaric, as heir. His mother, Amalasuntha, acts as regent, and she is very Roman in her outlook. She wants her son to have a classical Roman education.
And the Gothic nobles are not having it.
They are violently opposed. They argue that a Roman education makes a man cowardly and submissive. And this really shows how dramatically the prestige of that old literary education had collapsed. To them, reading books was a sign of weakness.
So education itself becomes a political battleground.
A huge one. The nobles even claimed Theoderic had a policy against it. They said he would never let Gothic children go to school because, and this is a quote, if the fear of the strap once came over them, they would never have the resolution to despise sword or spear. The warrior path was seen as the only path. The Roman way was the road to ruin.
So with the Roman state gone, with this cycle of violence and this cultural clash, you have a society that is just crying out for some kind of structure, some kind of order.
A tremendous vacuum of purpose and justice. And this is where we turn to the experience of a young man named Benedict of Nursia.
He was the son of a Roman noble, sent to Rome for that classical education we were just talking about.
He was. But history tells us that what he found there was a student life that was dissolute and aimless. The capital of the world had become a place of moral collapse. The education that once guaranteed power now seemed to lead nowhere.
So he gets completely disillusioned. He walks away from it all.
He does what's called the Great Retreat. He abandons his studies, leaves the city, and goes to live as a hermit in a cave near Subiaco.
It's a classic response, isn't it? When the world outside offers only chaos, you turn inward.
Exactly. The search for order becomes a spiritual one. And news of his piety spreads. Soon, monks from a local monastery ask him to be their leader, their abbot.
And he agrees. but he brings a radically new idea of what monastic life should be.
After years of solitary reflection, it doesn't just offer spiritual guidance. He imposes structure. He demands a life that is regulated, quiet, and productive.
A total rejection of the aimlessness he'd seen. And the monks, they hated it.
They hated it so much they tried to poison his wine. That's how radical his vision of order was.
So he leaves them, but the idea doesn't die.
Not at all. He gathers his own devoted followers, and around the year 529, he leads them up a mountain. And this is a hugely symbolic moment. They burn the ruins of an old Roman temple to Apollo, and on that spot, they build their monastery, Monte Cassino.
And this is where he develops the rule of St. Benedict.
Yes, and you have to understand, the rule was essentially an alternative constitution for a new kind of society, a new kind of kingdom.
A kingdom not defined by politics or borders, but by discipline.
Precisely. It was a law, a lex, for a spiritual community. It laid out specific, actionable duties: relieve the poor, clothe the naked, visit the sick. But the real core was discipline over chaos. Silence was preferred to speech.
And the specific regulations create this perfectly ordered little world inside the monastery walls.
An entire social and political system. Monks have to rise at regular times for prayer. The abbot has to consult everyone on big decisions, but his word is final. And most importantly,
No personal property.
the vice of personal ownership had to be cut out by the very root. Nothing belonged to you, not your clothes, not even a book. Everything was communal. This completely removed the greed and ambition that was tearing the secular world apart.
And they had to work, right? Manual labor.
Prescribed hours. This combination of prayer, study, and physical work created these incredibly resilient, self-sufficient communities. With no stable government out there providing justice or security, the abbot of Monte Cassino provided exactly that.
So the rule offered unity, identity, and above all, order.
It did, and it made a promise. It promised that this very structured life, which starts as the least of beginnings, would lead to the heights of learning and virtue.
Which is the complete opposite of the world outside.
It's the ultimate inversion. In the Gothic kingdoms, learning was seen as a weakness. In the monastery, it was the path to salvation. The rule provided a clear path to a reward that the political world simply couldn't offer anymore. It was an alternative law, and it proved to be infinitely more durable than any of the kingdoms of the Goths.
So the centuries of Roman imperial rule, they end in this mess of treachery, assassination, and chaos, replaced by these warring Gothic kingdoms. But maybe the most durable, the most important structure to emerge from all of this was the Benedictine monastic rule, a system focused entirely on internal discipline and community. Was the true foundation for the future of the West, built not in the throne rooms, but in the quiet, orderly retreat from political power. Oh, and by the way, if you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.